Hopefully this is going to work. And all right, I think we might have made it back. Okay, oops, Elaine says that I was live. Well, now I'm live again. So welcome back. I guess today was a little bit of an anomaly, but thank you, Elaine. So if I was already live, I'm just going to continue. Hopefully you guys are back with me. We're talking about activation, and we're talking about how the challenges of our lives can serve to wake us up to our capabilities and to our superpowers, to a strength and resilience and ability that that we didn't know we had or were capable of, that might have been inconceivable. It's like a passage through a time warp or through dimensions, to be having one identity, perhaps as a victim, and then all of a sudden something activating, something shifting, so that you arise and step into the ownership of your power and your presence. I remember having a very vivid dream. I don't know if it was a dream per se, or if it was an interdimensional experience. I'm not really certain. I kind of think the latter, but in any case, I was being pursued and attacked by this very, very frightening entity. And what I vividly remember is cowering, and this thing was still coming at me and threatening me. And there was a moment where I just became a primal energy, like a force of nature, and spiraled up from this cowering and became humongous and just spoke in a roar to this other entity. Don't you ever present yourself to me again. Don't you ever try this again. And it was an activation. It was a waking up of an energy that I hadn't even known existed within me from the victim perspective. And it was this primal energy that was like a God energy, kind of, just like God and goddess type energy, you know, just like this will never happen again. And an ownership of that primal power. It was an awesome experience. And as you can imagine, I mean, it's still very present with me to have recognized that, or to be still experiencing the power of that. So what kind of activation have you experienced? I know that so many of you have had really phenomenal type experiences and awakenings. And I'm thinking about it interestingly as an activation, because and maybe the suffering and the challenge and the difficulties that led up to that activation were kind of an apprenticeship or an internship or the gauntlet that had to be gone through to be able to get to that point of activation, that point of where we actually get plugged into our own power. And then what? You know, then what? Once this activation occurs, then what? Where do we take it? What do we do with it? do we need to keep experiencing periodic reactivations? And it may be, maybe there's an activation and then there's an evolution that occurs, perhaps, or a like quantum states, where we're in this state. And then this actually works for me. I don't know if you are familiar with the idea of how quantum energy works, but the idea is with an electron, they never know where exactly an electron is, right? But it's in orbit around the nucleus, right? So it's in orbit, and the shape of, hello, Elaine, thank you so much for chiming in. So I know this is working. Good morning, good morning. It's so good to be with you. So we're talking about quantum physics here for a moment, and quantum packets of energy. So the idea is that there's this one orbital that's sort of a circular orbital. That's the first one. And it's within any area in that energy field that the electron might exist in terms of probability. It could be anywhere in that space. And then when there's enough energy that is sucked up by that electron, then, oh, thank you, Elaine. When there's enough energy that's sucked up by that electron, it doesn't just gradually change its energy state. It all of a sudden jumps into this other energy state that's more like a barbell kind of thing. Or I know it's looking like an infinity symbol, but we're looking at like two bells that are like a barbell, or almost like an hourglass. And then it operates in that probability field. And then when there's more energy, it goes to another state. And these are quantum jumps. And I'm wondering if that's what happens with us, with our consciousness, is that, yes, I believe that there are gradual changes within that probability field, perhaps. And then all of a sudden we have these quantum leaps that take us into a whole different orbital, so shall we say. Good morning, Lisa, welcome. Great to have you here. Good Friday to all. And yeah, so activation. What have you noticed? Like, what was there a pivotal moment? Yeah, I can say that another pivotal moment for me in my life, maybe the biggest pivotal moment, was when I keep saying I was 15. I may have been 17. I'm not really sure, but I think I was 15. But anyway, I had a moment where I was talking on the telephone and I said, I know. And all of a sudden I was catapulted into this knowingness, this presence of being knowing, not me knowing something, but being the knowingness. And that presence beyond space, beyond time, beyond identity really shaped my life ever since, because it was the most real experience I ever experienced. And I have pretty much spent my life trying to find ways to access that state again, trying to gain access to that state again. And so that was a pivotal moment. And I believe it was an activation because it led me on a path of discovery that has truly, truly shaped my life in every dimension. So, and that came out of nowhere, that activation, and it not unlike the dream where I rose up as this powerful force to no longer be victimized by whatever this energy was that was tormenting me. So what about you? Do you have personal stories of activation? What do you think about this notion that our lives are put together in such a way that we have these challenges that lead to the potential for the activation, that without those challenges, we wouldn't have had that awakening. We wouldn't have had that strength. So I know for me, the challenges that I experienced in my growing up, and for me, what was excruciatingly painful, has made me able to be in my coaching practice, to be with whatever pain someone else might present with to me. Like I can be present to it. And the reason that I can be present to it is because I know I've survived it myself. So I'm not afraid of it. And so I guess this brings us to thinking about the darkness, having experienced the darkness, I know that I can survive it. I know that I can weather it. And I know that because I know that I've I've moved through it, and it doesn't mean it won't recur, but because I have had experiences of having moved through it, I can allow myself to be present to the pain that other people have without fearing it, and without making it without wow, hard to find the words. Isn't that interesting? Without making it the reality. There we go. That when we're going through the darkness, it's a moment. It's not the entirety of things. And there are times when it feels like the entirety of things for us. And in those moments when it feels like the entirety of things, that's when it either kills us or makes us stronger. And I've seen it kill people, or I've seen people succumb to it, shall I say. And the it actually is not really an external. The it is the internal perception and experience. And Elaine says, when we have truly let go of the victim stories, they are no longer needed and will no longer show up in our lives, dream or physical life. Interesting, yes. And when there's the victim stories, I think we get to a point, thank you, Elaine, I think we get to a point where we recognize that they're stories. And they may be an epic story, but we have the ability to transform beyond them, way beyond them, to empowerment. And maybe that's the activation. One of the activations, is that movement, that quantum leap, because I don't think that there is a linear path from victimhood to empowerment. I think it is a quantum leap. I think it is, we could consider an activation or a new orbital, a new level of energy, because what happens is that the experience of life is, the lens through which life is lived is then profoundly altered. And Elaine says, our life will show us if we're ready to see the truth. And I think that our truth changes. I don't know that there is an absolute truth about interpreting the world, that our interpretation and our experience of the world is always through a lens, always. And through any given lens, our experience is that we're perceiving the truth, or that we're present to the truth, or this is what's true, but what we're reflecting is the lens through which we're perceiving, whether it's a lens of love and joy and connection, and the lens of victim, persecution, darkness. So Elaine says the truth of being a victim or not. So interestingly, I mean, I think that when someone is I agree with you, Elaine, that you and I are on the same page, that there is no victimhood. And when one is experiencing being a victim, that is their truth. I don't imagine that people are feeling victim, like really being victim, and perceiving that there's another option. I don't think that once we start perceiving there's another option, then that's the beginning of the activation. So Lisa says, my life has been full of issues. I was physically, mentally, and verbally abused. Lisa, I'm so sorry. Lisa continues, I allowed myself to be a victim. Yesterday, I had a moment that showed me I have learned and grown from those things. Congratulations. That's so rewarding and exciting to see our growth, right? So Lisa continues, the manager at my job was being verbally abusive and treating me like a dog. At first, I was upset, wanting to go into a corner. Then, this is like my dream, Lisa, then like a lightning bolt, I was no longer a victim. I was empowered, and I marched right into his office and let him know. I became empowered, and I now know without question, no one will ever put me in that place again. Congratulations, Lisa. I and hopefully everybody here is celebrating with you. And how about that? Like you said, like a bolt of lightning, that was an activation. That's what I'm talking about. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting that you talk about this shift from abuse, and because I was going to be talking about how we transform from these things. I was going to name things differently today, but around growth and change, but you got it, and congratulations. And this is a day to celebrate, or yesterday is a day to celebrate, and today to celebrate your newfound empowerment. That's phenomenal and wonderful. Rosalind says, GP Walsh does inner reconciliation work where we are meaning making machines. 100%. I say that all the time. And we tell ourselves stories that have kept us from feeling safe. Exactly. We're telling ourselves that, like, we're constantly reinforcing the lens through which we see the world unless we start to question. And that's what these mornings are about, is to be having these conversations where we get to look at our assumptions, where we get to reassess and reevaluate and question, because I believe that education or awareness is the first and most important step in transformation. When we become aware, then we, by our awareness, we naturally begin to change and transform. So thank you for that. Elaine says, it's really hard to believe or see that we are actually creating the experience when we play the role of victim. So true, Elaine. What's happening when we play the role of victim is, going back to our conversation yesterday, is we are assigning blame and responsibility for our lives on the circumstances and on everything external, rather than taking that ownership and empowering ourselves in the context of our own lives. So Lisa says, it was a very long road, but well worth it. And so, Lisa, having been through that horrible abuse physically, mentally, and verbally throughout your life, to come, all of that, can you recognize that all of that wasn't what precipitated the activation that let you come to the place where no one will ever, ever put you in that place again? So, like, all of that now makes sense to get to the place where you recognize that you that you don't have to be that person anymore. And never, no one will ever put you in that place again, because you are no longer that person. And nobody can. That in some respect, you were complicit in being in that place. What shifted was you're no longer that victim. What shifted is you've stepped into ownership. You've stepped into your power and your superpowers. And that, like, by releasing yourself from the victim role, you made a quantum leap into this other dimension of being. How awesome is that? Really, really awesome. So Elaine says, yes, Lisa, remember your right to say no more. Awesome. Exactly. No more. Or just no. You know, this isn't happening anymore. That's the end of it. And Elaine says, our life experiences are to wake us up. So perfect, as Lisa has shown, her life experience gave her an opportunity to choose again. And she did awesome. I agree. Awesome, 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 Lisa. And really what happened in that moment, that lightning bolt, is that you redefined yourself. You know, to go back to this idea of activation, you know, all of a sudden you became activated and you jumped out of that orbit of victim into the orbit of self-empowerment, self-directed experience. And then once in that orbital, then there's a lot to tune and calibrate, right? As we're acclimating to that new place. You know, you might have whiffs of victimhood here and there, but you can't go back. You can't go back. You can't forget what this kind of knowing. So Lisa says, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's amazing that you're talking about this today. Well, it's amazing. What, don't we love the synchronicities and how we're all connected, right? It's so perfect. And it is amazing. I think this notion of activation in and of itself is such an empowering idea, to realize that, and it's usually in retrospect, because going through it is, you know, we're so immersed in the victimhood that we don't know beyond the victimhood, right? But then the activation, it just gets to a point like where there's so much energy, there's been so much input that it just has to pop to the next level and the next quantum orbit, or the next quantum dimension of beingness. And yeah, so it's exciting to know that that's available to us. And I think it keeps going as we evolve and emerge. You know, we pop into whole new dimensions of being, and then it's almost like the previous dimension doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because you're not that anymore. You're not that being anymore. You're not that consciousness anymore. You're not that frequency anymore. It's gone. And that's a phenomenon I've seen, I have seen many times in clients, where 1 minute before a session, they are devastated and in despair and feeling hopeless. And after the session, they're integrated and feeling empowered. And, you know, like in the space of an hour, this massive transformation. And it's a quantum shift. It is a quantum shift, and we do have quantum shifts of consciousness and presence. And I play with the idea of infinite dimensions of being, and I do see in that model how it's possible to be jumping into different dimensions of experience and quantum realities, so to speak. So Elaine says, lessons are completed and the soul is ready to go to the next stage of its awakening, and on we go. That's right. It's so true, right? It's just like, okay, next. And looking back, it's just, it doesn't even make so much sense anymore, right? I mean, we can recount the story, but it's not present for us in the same way in our beingness. And Elaine says the victim role and the persecutor role and the savior of all work together in the stories. Yes, victim, persecutor, and savior. The triad, that's really interesting, you know, to be looking at that as a triad. And how when we conceive of things in terms of victim, there has to be a persecutor, right? There's not always a savior, but there has to be a persecutor if there's a victim, right? And if there is a, we set up a lot of polarities. We set up a lot of polarities, and my sense is that if there is a truth, it's in the middle, you know, that it is where no polarities exist. And there's oneness. You know, we think about the even with oneness, there's the polarity of separation, right? Oneness and separation. But I'm reading a new book that is talking about science and consciousness and time, and like a notion of how the world exists. And there was one sentence that 1 + 1 = 1, in that it's all part of the same thing. You know, it's all one thing, all of it. And the polarities are the illusions that we create to create a dynamic flow of movement in some way or another, right? It's interesting dynamic. So Elaine says there's always a savior. Saviors are everywhere, and they come in many different ways. Everybody's always looking to be saved until they're not. I used to be looking for Prince Charming to sweep me away. You know, it's somebody to save me. I looked for aliens to come and take me away. I looked for, you know, anybody that would come and rescue me. Yes, it used to be looking for a savior. I don't know that they arrived, but I was always looking for one. So interesting dynamic. I know that lots of us have savior complexes, want to save people, you know, want to support people, want to save them from the trials and tribulations. So Elaine says, we know where we are in our lives by the experiences that show up to reflect back what's inside. 100%, but it's not just the experiences, but to notice also the way we respond to their experiences or react to them. And so we get to see the drama or the lack of drama in our lives, you know, the peace or the drama. I think that might be, you know, another dichotomy there, peace or drama. And I am so thrilled to see so much less drama in my life as the years have passed. I see that as a reflection of how far I've come, for sure. Elaine says that's what the experience is for, is to trigger you to see what's going on. I agree 100%. So our experience allows us life allows us the opportunity to see ourselves all the time, and then to see beyond ourselves. What a concept, you know, to see the bigger picture, or to be part of the greater flow, and not necessarily having to distinguish ourselves as an individual drop in the greater flow of the ocean, but to be able to be the ocean. And that's where 1 + 1 = 1, you know, like when we, as the drop of water, get to be the ocean. Elaine says, energy cannot lie. It shows up exactly as it is. And with that, it is what it is, 100%. The thing is that we don't necessarily recognize it. Energy is, and then we interpret. That's kind of how it works. And to go back to, I think it was Rosalind who said, we are meaning making machines, and that's what we do. So, and then we get to see, if we can stand back and notice the meanings we're making, we get to see where we are. So anyway, it's always a pleasure and a joy to be with you guys. Sorry for the weird rocky start this morning. And Elaine says, you recognize it when you're ready to see it all in divine timing, perfect orchestration. And I agree with you 100%, Elaine. And we often get to see the perfect orchestration in hindsight, right? 2020 hindsight, where we get to look back and say, oh my gosh, that was perfect. What the highest, well, the most joyful place perhaps to be is to be able to be present to that perfection as it's unfolding, rather than just in hindsight, right? To be recognizing it as it's occurring and allowing it as it's occurring. And that becomes its own quantum shift in consciousness and awareness and presence and activation. So on that note, I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful weekend. It has been such a joy and pleasure to be with you, and to have these awesome conversations. And until next time, lots and lots and lots of love.